Dracula's soul transmigrated into the body of a boy. His name was Soma Cruz.
I've played Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow so many times, but every time I reach the end of the game, I still feel leaving behind a strange emptiness. Not because the ending is unclear or confusing, but because it feels like someone just closed the book halfway through the final chapter. It's about Soma Cruz. The way Dawn of Sorrow treats Soma Cruz towards the end is honestly too abrupt for me. I mean, he's literally Dracula reborn. He's the last Dark Lord candidate, and still, after 2036, he just walks away. So what really happened to him? I need the answers, and so do you. So today, let's break it down carefully and see what happens to Soma after the end of Dawn of Sorrow. What really happens to Soma at the end of Dawn of Sorrow? The ending of Dawn of Sorrow is actually a bit complex. Based on the narrative, the game can have both a good and a bad ending. By the time we reach the final act, we see Celia Fortner's plan being revealed in full. Now, she's not just trying to resurrect Dracula. She knows this fact that Dracula's power has been reincarnated. But who's that incarnation? Well, that's Soma Cruz. And hence, Celia's goal is not to summon a dead vampire anymore, but instead trigger the transformation of a living one. And she takes a psychological approach towards this. Dracula went into darkness mainly because of trauma due to Lisa's execution. Celia knows this and wants to exploit this trauma to turn Soma into the Dark Lord. For this, Mina Hakuba's execution is staged in front of Soma. The intent behind it is quite brutal. Break Soma's heart and ignite his rage to unleash the Dark Lord. And exactly as per plan, when Soma sees Mina is dead, something snaps inside him. His entire composure shatters in an instant. There is an immediate change of character in him. Not only does he want to become the Dark Lord now, but he even says that nobody else but him can become the Dark Lord. That is a chilling announcement. Soma doesn't fear becoming the Dark Lord anymore. Mina's death trap has worked as planned. An authority in which he puts his stakes forward is quite shocking. But anyways, there are no other legitimate successors, and the throne belongs to him by metaphysical law. For a moment, we see that transformation in Soma. He is radiating a different energy altogether. This is supposed to be the bad ending. Although it's not exactly canon, the possibility of this bad ending is real and not just some exaggerated melodrama. But just then, the illusion is broken and Mina is found to be alive. The trigger attempt fails as Soma regains clarity. He immediately reasserts control over himself and rejects Dracula's inheritance. He refuses the throne completely, and that's not because he lacks power, but because he chose humanity over power. This is the canonical good ending where the castle begins to collapse due to Soma's decision to leave the throne empty. After all, how can the structure which once housed Dracula sustain itself without an active Dark Lord ruling it? Soma escapes the collapsing castle alongside Mina, Julius Belmont, Genya Aricado, Yoko Belnades, and Hammer. Meanwhile, the immediate threat is over as the castle crumbles and the Dracula cycle appears to end. This is the official conclusion. However, according to the bad ending, if Soma enters the final confrontation without the correct soul combination, he would not be able to overcome the internal chaos. In that version, he would embrace the Dark Lord identity fully, and the castle will remain intact. No collapse takes place, and Soma doesn't have to escape. Yes, the game allows this bad ending. You can imagine how thin the margin between rejection and surrender would be. What if Soma chose the bad ending and declared himself the true heir of darkness? It all depends upon Soma's resistance and emotional grounding. Otherwise, he will be immediately and completely transformed. The good ending shows us who Soma chooses to be. But the bad ending shows us what he is capable of fundamentally becoming. What happens to Soma after 2036 in the actual story? After the castle collapsed in 2036, something unusual happened in the franchise. The timeline still moves forward, but without Soma. According to canon, Soma has now returned to his normal life in Mina Hakuba City in Japan. He has reunited with his friends, and life is back to normal for him in their presence. The main story isn't dedicated to Soma anymore. There is no confirmation, even whether his powers have faded or evolved. He is just not a protagonist anymore for the official timeline. This is unusual for Castlevania because the game's narrative has always survived on generational continuity. We have seen the Belmont lineage passing the whip down centuries. Dracula has to be repeatedly resurrected because the franchise is built on cycles, but this cycle comes to a halt when Dracula reincarnates as Soma and he rejects the throne. That's when the narrative goes completely silent. However, it's still not exactly clear if Soma has lost the power of dominance. We're not even told if Dracula's essence can even dissolve harmlessly. What we come to know is just that Soma continues to resist his fate and manages to return to life as a normal human. But what does normal even mean for someone who has once commanded the souls of monsters? Can he stop absorbing souls now, or his power will be naturally reduced? Or maybe he will simply learn to live with it quietly. Whatever it was, it never gets cleared. And this absence of detail creates a massive narrative tension. After all, the canon never says what happened to Soma. Did he become the Dark Lord or just retired? It just stops mentioning him, and this is why his fate feels so open-ended. This lack of continuity has fueled years of speculation among fans, not because the ending is contradicting in itself, but simply because it feels incomplete. We know that Soma has survived and gone home where he lives with his friends. That's all great, but the throne he rejected will not vanish with that decision. Also, we know it can't be officially transferred or destroyed in a cosmic sense as well, so it must be unoccupied. But it's hard to believe that in a franchise built so heavily on inheritance, the unoccupied throne can be a permanent thing. Why Soma is the true heir of darkness. Now let's get to the heart of this entire discussion. Soma is the true heir of darkness. But why? That's because he is the reincarnation of Dracula. But if we need to truly know what happened after Dawn of Sorrow, we must go deep and understand what Soma actually is. Soma Cruz is not just a candidate or a temporary host selected by coincidence. He is literally Dracula reborn. This fact matters more than almost anything else in the franchise. We saw in Castlevania Aria of Sorrow how Dracula's defeat during the 1999 Demon Castle War didn't erase his power, but only weakened it. The metaphysical essence of Dracula needed a new anchor in the human world, and Soma Cruz became that anchor. And now it's only Soma who is Dracula's direct reincarnation, and that means only he can naturally inherit the full throne of darkness. The power of dominance is also proof of this fact. This ability allows Soma to absorb the souls of monsters and command them at will. But this isn't just a gameplay mechanic designed to make the combat system look cool, it is more of a narrative thing. The one thing that has really defined Dracula through the centuries is his control over monsters, and this authority is never borrowed. It's an intrinsic supernatural ability which can only be inherited. Using this power, Soma can convert enemy souls into 4 types of tactical abilities and boost his combat capabilities. This is a big differentiating factor. Those chosen temporarily for the role do not have absolute power of dominance. Their power does when they are defeated, but we have seen Soma using his absolute power in Harmony of Despair, and we know Soma's power is not conditional. It is more like a biological inheritance. Even when he denies being Dracula, the power of dominance will respond to him naturally. Souls will continue to flow towards him as if recognizing that power, and therefore Soma doesn't need rituals or validation to sit on the throne. The throne itself recognizes him because it is tied to his essence. And when Celia Fortner plans Mina's fake death scene to trigger Soma, it's because she understands something very basic. Soma doesn't need to gain power, but he needs to just lose self-control. That's why when Mina appears to die, Soma's reaction is quite instant. His transformation into a Dark Lord is almost immediate, when he says with authority that only he can become the Dark Lord. This is not ego, this is clarity. He knows fully well that all other candidates are just fragments. There is only one who can become the Lord of Darkness, and that's Soma with his unbroken lineage. But even when Soma rejects Dracula's inheritance, he hasn't actually renounced it. That's a crucial difference. As I said before, the throne hasn't disappeared. Chaos never announces its retirement. The metaphysical structure of darkness might have become dormant for the time being, but it's still pretty much there. Dracula's cycle of resurrection cannot end simply because his soul reincarnated into a human being who refused the throne, so it evolved. Now it lies consolidated into a single living individual capable of choosing restraint. If you see it that way, then Soma is the final version of Dracula, and that's another reason why no other character can legitimately claim the title. All the others might interact with darkness externally, but Soma is actually internal darkness. That means he doesn't rule the castle, but contains the castle itself within him. According to the good ending, the castle had collapsed, but that doesn't mean that darkness is destroyed forever. But now its transformation inside Soma means the darkness cannot sustain itself without Soma's active acceptance. The dark power lacks activation without Soma accepting it. This means that the true heir of darkness is someone who actively chooses not to. And to be honest, that kind of heir is far more dangerous than a conqueror. Why Graham, Dimitri, and Dario aren't the real heirs. Graham Jones is introduced in Aria of Sorrow as a supposed Dark Lord candidate. His claim is boosted with his belief that he is Dracula reborn, and even the castle initially acknowledges him. But once he gets defeated by Soma and confronts Chaos directly, the truth becomes clear. Graham is just a false Dark Lord. His selection was not only temporary, but also conditional. The castle was forced to recognize Graham only because the true heir had not yet awakened fully. When Soma confronts Chaos, the metaphysical authority shifts decisively. Graham cannot contain the full power and collapses under it. But another probable heir, Dmitry Blinov, operates differently. He has the ability to mimic powers. As such, he tries to replicate fragments of Dracula's essence. But mere replication cannot be the origin of power. The origin has to be somewhere else. When Soma absorbs Dimitri's soul, Dimitri effectively becomes a part of Soma's internal reservoir. In Dawn of Sorrow, Dimitri's revival is only possible because he resides inside Soma's soul. So Dimitri exists only because Soma houses him. That clearly means that Dimitri is not the heir, because without Soma, he doesn't really have an anchor. At best, he is just a shadow orbiting the air. And then there is also Dario Bossi. Dario has his own Fury ability, somewhat like Dracula's destructive magic. But when Soma defeats him and absorbs his soul, Dario's claim evaporates permanently. There is no indication that Dario even had a legitimate throne connection. He is merely a vessel designed for Celia's ritual. In fact, all these three characters are described in various sources as candidates or vessels. None of them are the true inheritors. They can be candidates but not heirs. Soma is never shown as only a possibility, but always shown as the conclusion. Maybe that's why even the bad ending in Dawn of Sorrow feels so convincing. If Soma accepts the throne, there will be no debate. No rivalry or cosmic argument will unfold. The castle will also remain intact because its rightful ruler has now claimed it. After all, the throne belongs to him exclusively. Where we actually see Soma after Dawn of Sorrow. Even after Dawn of Sorrow, we don't have Soma vanishing completely from existence. He just shifts into a different narrative space. In Castlevania Harmony of Despair, he appears as a playable character. His power of dominance still functions exactly as it did in previous titles. He is shown to even retain full access to absorbed souls. This confirms that Soma's abilities did not disappear after 2036. However, the setting of Harmony of Despair is a Grimoire-based multiverse campaign. Book-based recreations of prior conflicts are shown and characters from different eras are pulled in. It's not a chronological storyline, and that's why it shouldn't be considered to be continuing Soma's personal story as such. But then comes Castlevania Grimoire of Souls. This is where things get especially interesting. Soma initially appeared as a positive and supportive figure. However, later players also happen to encounter the Dark King Soma, who is a corrupted version of himself created within Grimoire's distorted reality. You can see Soma fully embracing the Dark Lord identity in this version. But if you look at the canon, the game also makes something clear. This Dark King Soma is just a Grimoire reality replica of Soma corrupted by the book. The story even has him restored and repenting his crimes later. Hence, the narrative still does not cement his status as the true heir. Instead, it just teases us that it can be a potential outcome that will have to be reversed. We know that spin-offs like these don't provide closure, but we know at least Soma's powers remain intact, and his identity as Dracula's reincarnation also remains acknowledged. What they do not provide is a final answer. This means that even outside the main timeline, the franchise avoids locking him into a definitive fate. The true heir remains active and the throne still remains conceptually viable, just that the story remains paused. Why his fate after 2036 is still such a big mystery. Now let's face an undeniable truth. Did you know that Konami never wrote Soma's final chapter? He didn't die on screen or had any permanent transformation. We never even got confirmation that his powers faded or if his darkness vanished forever. So yeah, his fate after 2036 is still a big mystery. But we know that he is still alive as Dracula's reincarnation and has the power of dominance. But this gap of narrative from the storyline has been debated for years. If you ask me, the story arc feels abandoned. The appearance of Dark King Soma in Grimoire of Souls only shows that the concept of his corruption might be a narrative possibility, but because it occurs within a Grimoire reality, it still doesn't resolve the main timeline. So what does that leave us with? A human who contains the soul of the most powerful Dark Lord in history, or a throne that cannot be inherited by anyone else? Or maybe a castle that collapses only when its true heir refuses it. Maybe reality will turn out to be more nuanced? I believe Soma's role has transformed from potential tyrant to eternal guardian after 2036. This isn't about guarding humanity from Dracula, but instead it's about guarding humanity from himself. If Dracula's resurrection cycle can end, it can only end when Soma never chooses to occupy the throne. But this won't be a peaceful retirement for Soma either, because as long as he lives, the throne will always have a rightful owner. And God forbid, if something were ever to break the emotional anchors that kept him grounded, like if Mina would have really died, then who knows? Maybe that kind of trauma would have replicated Lisa's execution and the transformation would not even require a ritual. That possibility of transformation is why the mystery of the true heir of darkness still persists. So friends, Soma's story might not have ended, it might just be paused at the moment of choice, because the heir of darkness will always be carrying the throne inside of him. What do you think about the true heir of darkness? Soma Cruz may have survived Dawn of Sorrow, he rejected the throne, but can he ever stop being its rightful heir? The castle might have collapsed according to the good ending, but the dark power still exists inside of him. And maybe the real ending wasn't even about defeating that darkness, it was just about containing it. Because sometimes the most dangerous Dark Lord is the one who chooses not to rise. What about you guys? What are your thoughts about Soma Cruz and the true heir of darkness? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, like, share, and subscribe. A subscription is the best way to be updated in all of our latest content. This is John of Marvelous Gamers. I'll see you on the next video.